Choking is a word that no athlete wants to have used to describe their performance. We all want to be clutch players, right? Come up big in those pressure-filled and big-time moments. But what happens when you do choke? And most importantly, how do you minimize the chances of you choking in these big moments during games? Well, that's what we're going to be covering in this video. Hey there, I'm Eli Straw, I'm a performance coach and the founder of SuccessStartsWithin.com. So what does it mean to choke during games? Well, when we use that label to describe a player, we are always talking about these moments during games where the situation itself seems more important, right? So it's late in the game, it's a big moment, it's a pressure-filled situation, and the athlete fails. Right? They underperform and they don't come up clutch and help their team win. A lot of times these will be moments where if you perform well, your team will win. But if you perform poorly, your team will lose. And that's where we say athletes choke. Now, as a mental performance coach, I've worked with athletes from all over the world, and I've worked with athletes who have come up clutch consistently under pressure. And I've also worked with players who tend to choke under pressure, and what I've helped them do is get to the point where they can perform better in these crunch time moments. Now, even the athletes who tend to come up clutch, right? So they perform better under pressure. They aren't always performing perfectly under pressure. They still fail at times. Because the truth is, we can never be perfect in these big moments, just like we can never be perfect throughout games. But what we want to do is we want to learn how to consistently approach these big time moments to give ourselves the best chance of success under pressure. And so what I want to do here in a second is explain to you some core principles that athletes apply that help them come up clutch and stop choking. But what I first want to discuss is why this choking happens in the first place, right? Why is it that there are these big moments that tend to be moments where you underperform? Well, there are three reasons why this will happen. And reason number one is trying to force, right? You're trying to force that result. Now, I have a story of a time where I choked under pressure, and it's a memory that has stuck with me for about 10 years now, right? It's stuck with me for a long time. So it was my senior year in high school in the state semifinal baseball game. The game was pretty close. It was the last inning, and I think we were either down by 1 run or 2 runs, and we had bases loaded, and I was coming up to the plate. Now, up to that point in the season, I had been one of our best hitters on the team, so I felt pretty confident that my teammates wanted me to be up to bat in that moment. So it was a pretty cool experience for me. Unfortunately, I had a weak little ground ball to the shortstop. He threw me out at first base. Game was over because there were 2 outs. Our team lost. Season was finished, right? So I choked under pressure. I choked in that moment. And one thing I vividly remember is that in the batter's box, I was so desperate to get a hit, right? I really wanted to get a hit that I tried to force a hit. Instead of just allowing myself to have a normal at bat, swing smoothly, look for a good pitch, I was stressing, I was pressing, I was forcing. And this is something that I see in a lot of athletes when they do choke under pressure. They try to force that outcome. Now, when we try to force an outcome, what are we trying to control? We are trying to control something that will happen in the future. Now, first and foremost, we cannot control something that will happen in the future right now. But we also very rarely can control the outcome in and of itself, especially if we're talking about a sport like baseball or even a sport like football if you're trying to throw a pass or throw a touchdown or even make a basket in basketball. These are things that we can influence, right? Like I could influence my at-bat by looking for a good pitch and putting a good swing on the ball. But I could not control the result, whether it's the result of where the ball goes, the result of whether or not the player in the field makes the play and gets me out, or even what pitch the pitcher would throw to me for that one swing. So when we know that these outcomes are not fully within our control, but then we try to control them, right? We try to force that result. This is where we will see ourselves play with too much stress and anxiety in these moments of pressure, and that's something that will lead to choking and underperforming. Reason number 2 is being too afraid of failing. Now, if you're in a big time moment in a game, right? So going back to my example, the last inning of a baseball game, I'm up to bat, there's 2 outs. If I get out and I fail, game over, right? Season's over. So the consequence of me getting out is huge at that moment, right? At least it's huge in my mind. And this is a common characteristic of all moments of pressure because for a situation to be a situation within a game where we will either be labeled a clutch player or a choking player, The situation has to seem more important than all other situations during the game. And the truth is, it is more important because it's the moment that you're in at that point. Now, if a situation is more important to us, what also tends to be more important is the negative consequence that could happen if we fail in that moment. So for me, getting out was a huge consequence that I wanted to avoid. But what happens when we try to avoid negative consequences when we play? When we try to avoid negative consequences, we tend to play timidly, we tend to hold ourselves back, and we do not play as aggressively and freely as we normally do. However, if we want to succeed, we have to play aggressively, we have to play freely, we have to play naturally, we just have to let ourselves play in these moments, which isn't something that happens when we are afraid of making mistakes. So that's another reason why choking happens. We are too afraid of the mistake, right? Too afraid of failing. So then we might hold ourselves back, hesitate, and take ourselves out of the natural rhythm of the game. And reason number 3 is simply because the outcome that we want, or the outcome that we want to avoid, is distracting. And so when it's distracting, it takes our attention away from the present moment. But the present moment or the process of your game is what will lead to the result that you want in the first place. But when we are so caught up on what will happen, what will the result of this moment be? This is a big moment. I need to succeed in this moment. What's that result going to be? I'm not giving as much attention to what's happening right now, and I'm not giving enough attention to the process that will lead to the result that I want. So in these big moments, if you're trying to force the result, right? If you are too afraid of making those mistakes and failing, and then if you think too much about the outcome, so you become distracted. These are 3 main reasons why you will choke under pressure. Now, if you currently are choking under pressure and you would like to become a clutch player, what can you do? Well, equally, there are 3 tips that I have for you. And these are 3 tips that I use with all the athletes I work with in one-on-one mental coaching. Now, if you are interested in learning more about one-on-one mental coaching or any of the programs that I have available, I've put links to those in the description below. Now, tip number 1 is you want to be prepared. This will happen before you actually begin the game. Preparation is critical in terms of your confidence when you play. When we come to these big moments, these crunch time moments, if we want to be able to let go and just play freely, which is something that I'll discuss here in a second, we have to have a certain level of trust in ourselves and our skills. That kind of trust needs to be built before the game even starts, right? Throughout the week, and kind of part of a pregame routine in a sense to get yourself ready to play. But when you know that you have done absolutely everything to prepare, it makes it easier for you to trust yourself in that moment. And we have to have that type of trust in order to perform our best in these moments. So how do you go about preparing? Well, you want to make sure that you are prepared physically, and you want to make sure you are prepared mentally. Physical preparation will include everything about your physical game, your technique, your skills. Are you doing everything you need to be doing throughout the week to fine-tune and make sure that you have strong muscle memory and you trust in your skills? But physical preparation also involves your rest, your nutrition, stretching really well, right? Getting to the point where you're really warmed up and primed and ready to go physically before the game starts. But make sure you've checked all those boxes in terms of physical preparation. Mental preparation will involve things you're doing throughout the week to generate the mindset you want come game time. But it will also involve what you need to do pre-game to get into the mindset that you want for the game. This will involve things like a self-talk routine, performing visualization throughout the week and before the game begins, and also using some breath work to calm your mind and to help relax your body. When you are prepared, it is easier to be confident in these big time moments and come up clutch. Tip number 2 is to stick to your routines. When I go back to that example I gave earlier of my senior year in high school and the state semifinal game, another thing that stands out to me is when I was in the on-deck circle. I remember watching the batter that was ahead of me, and I was going through kind of my routine a little bit. I was trying to time up the pitcher, but my mind was so focused on the fact that I was going to get to be up to bat to help my team win, to get us to the state championship game, and I was just constantly thinking about that. I even remember looking into the stands and kind of listening to them cheer. Somebody was talking to me. So in other words, I was not focused on my pre-at-bat routine in the same way that I was normally focused on my pre-at-bat routine. And this is something that happens a lot to us as athletes when we are going into these crunch time moments, these big, big moments. It's easy to lose sight of our normal routines. It's easy to forget about small steps. It's easy to not give as much focus and intent to the routines we use preparing for these big moments. But when we are in these big moments, right, the moments where you are either going to choke or come up clutch, one of the things that we want to do is approach this situation just like any other situation. Because like I was describing earlier, when we try to force or we become too afraid of the outcome, that is driven by us seeing this moment as more important. Now, you're never going to convince yourself that the moment isn't important, and I would never suggest you do that. But what we can do is approach the situation like it was no different from any other situation, and that is very important when it comes to wanting to become clutch and be successful in these moments. Don't try to do anything different, right? Don't think that you need to do anything new just because it's a big moment, just because the result matters more. The thing you are doing will be the same as all the other things you've done throughout the game and any other time you've been in that situation throughout the whole season, really. We have to make sure that we stick to our routines and we approach this situation just like any other moment during a game. And tip number 3 is to let go and play freely. Now, I understand that this last tip is much easier said than done, but it's more of a mindset that you have to these moments. Now, like I said earlier, even athletes that come up clutch, they fail sometimes, right? We all fail in these big moments. There will be times when you choke, but there will be less times when you choke if you approach the situation not afraid to choke, right? If you approach the situation performing freely and naturally as if it were the first inning or the first quarter or the first few minutes of a game. If you can do that, your chances of success drastically increase because you will be playing naturally. You will be allowing yourself to play freely. You won't be so scared. You won't be so stiff in these big moments. So how do you get yourself to the point where you let go and you play freely? Well, you make sure you're prepared and you make sure you stick to your routines first off, but you also want to remind yourself that I give myself the best chance of success and I am the most competitive in these moments if I play freely, if I just let go of that fear of the result. As long as I try to control that future, as long as I try to control that result, I will limit my success. So we've got to make sure that we are approaching these situations with the mindset of letting go, play freely, play naturally, and just let whatever happens as a result of my play. So in summary, choking in sports is so frustrating, but we can minimize choking by learning how to approach these big moments in different ways. Make sure that you are not trying to over-control that result. Don't be afraid of those consequences, and make sure that your attention doesn't become too fixed on that future. Let's keep it in the present moment. And to do so, be as prepared as possible, both physically and mentally, for the game. Make sure you stick to your routines in these moments, and let go, play freely, and trust yourself to succeed. If you have any questions about this video or any other sports psychology topic, please let me know in the comments below. And if you're interested in one-on-one coaching or any of the sports psychology courses I have available, I've put links to those in the description below as well. Thank you for watching, and I wish you the best of success in all that you do.